The selfish giant, a grumpy old soul, lived in a massive gray castle. He had a beautiful garden full of flowers and birdsong. But he was selfish. He built a high wall around his garden. He put up a sign, "No trespassing." He wanted it all for himself.
The children loved the giant's garden. They played there after school. They laughed, they ran, they were happy. The garden was their haven.
Then the giant came back. He chased the children away.
He was lonely, but he didn't understand why. The giant locked the gate. He kept the children out. He kept the joy out. He kept himself locked in with his loneliness. The garden, once full of life, became silent. The flowers wilted, the birds flew away. The giant's castle was cold and dark. He had many rooms, but they were empty. He had a large table, but he ate alone. He had a roaring fire, but it did not warm him. He was a prisoner of his own making. He would look out his window.
He saw the children playing in the street. They were bundled up in coats and hats. They made snowmen and had snowball fights. They were full of life even in the winter.
The giant felt a pang of something in his chest. It was a feeling he did not recognize. It was a longing for something he had lost. He turned away from the window. He tried to ignore the feeling. Spring came, but not to the giant's garden. The trees remained bare. The flowers refused to bloom. The birds did not sing. It was still winter in the giant's world. Winter of the heart.
One day the giant heard a sound. It was a faint sound like a bird singing.
He looked out his window. He saw a small boy standing by the wall. The boy had climbed onto a rock. He was peeking over the wall.
The boy was looking at a single flower. It was a small white flower. It had bloomed in a corner of the garden.
The boy was smiling. The giant felt a strange warmth spread through him. He had forgotten what happiness looked like. But the warmth was fleeting. The giant's anger returned. He stormed out of his castle.
He yelled at the boy. He told him to go away.
The boy was frightened. He jumped down from the rock. He ran away.
The giant felt a surge of triumph. He had protected his garden. He had kept it for himself.
But the triumph was hollow.
He felt no joy. He felt only emptiness. The garden remained cold and still. He sat down on a bench. It was a stone bench, cold and hard. He felt the weight of his loneliness. He looked at the high wall. He saw his own reflection in the stone. He saw a monster. The giant spent the night in his cold, empty castle. He could not sleep. He kept hearing the boy's laughter in his dreams. He saw the boy's smile in the firelight. He felt a pain in his heart he had never felt before.
He got out of bed, went to the window, and looked out at the garden. It was still dark. The moon was a sliver in the sky. The stars were cold and distant. But, I saw something new. I saw the beauty of the night, the stillness of the trees, the peace of the sleeping world. I felt a longing for that peace, a desire to be part of it.
The giant went outside. He walked into the garden. He felt the cold air on his face, saw the frost on the ground, and the bare branches of the trees. He felt a sadness that was new to him.
He walked over to the wall, put his hand on the cold stone and felt the weight of his selfishness. He knew he had to change. He knew he had to let go.
And as he took a deep breath and started to tear down the wall, working all day and all night, breaking down the stones, pulling down the iron gate, clearing away the rubble, he opened his garden to the world.
The next morning, the children came back to the garden. They were overjoyed. They ran through the open gate, played among the trees, laughed, and sang. The garden was alive again. The giant watched from his window, a smile forming on his lips. He felt a warmth in his heart he had never felt before.
He went outside and walked among the children. They were not afraid of him anymore.
Among the joyful children, the giant saw the boy who had peeked over the wall. The boy was sitting in a tree, tears streaming down his face.
Why are you sad?
I can't climb down. I'm too scared.
The garden buzzed with the energy of play, but in that tree a little boy's fear echoed. Without hesitation, the giant gently lifted the boy out of the tree and set him down on the ground.
Smiling, he hugged the giant.
In that embrace, the giant felt a love he had never known, a joy that filled his whole being. He played with the children all day, pushing them on the swings, playing hide-and-seek and telling them stories. He laughed with them. He was no longer the selfish giant, he was the kind giant.
As evening came and the children went home, the giant stood at the gate watching them go.
A sweet sadness touched him, but he knew they would be back. He knew he would never be lonely again. The giant's garden flourished, blooming in every color, filled with the songs of birds and the laughter of children. It was a paradise on earth. The giant lived out his days surrounded by the children he loved, filled with the joy he had found. He had learned the true meaning of happiness, discovered the heart of love.
And every spring, when the first flowers bloomed, I remembered the boy in the tree. I remembered the day I learned to be kind. I remembered the day I found the garden within myself.
The Selfish Giant's story is a timeless tale of redemption. It teaches us that love is more important than possessions, that happiness comes from sharing, not from hoarding. It reminds us that the greatest gifts are those that come from the heart. The giant's transformation is a reminder that it is never too late to change, to open our hearts to others, to find the garden of love within ourselves. And when we do, we discover the true meaning of life. We are all capable of change, of love. We all have a garden within us. Let us open the gates of our hearts. Let us share our gifts with the world. Let us create a world where every garden blooms with love.